G'day, I'm Father Robin Koning. I'm the vocation director for the Australian Jesuit Province. And once more, I'm having a cuppa with a couple of my Jesuit mates.
With Father Robin, I'm Julian Butler, a Jesuit in formation, and we're joined today by Father Mark Raper. Father Mark, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Julian and Robin.
Mark, you're joining us from Myanmar. Would you tell us a bit about your ministry there and what brought you to Myanmar and what you've been working on there?
Yeah, well, I've just finished as superior. I was superior for about 11 years, but the first few years of that was while I was working in Manila as president of the conference, which means an overview of all the Asia Pacific countries. And but for the last 4 or more years, I've been resident in Myanmar. And we're a small community. Well, we're close to 50 Jesuits, but half of them are in studies abroad. So here we're working in 4 places, in Taunji, Michina, Bamor, and Yangon. Not that perhaps those names, place names mean very much to you, but they're 4 quite different parts of the country. And my role as superior was just really to help build up the community, care for the work and care for the people, the 2 aspects of a superior's work. Now, I'm relieved of that just last week or so, and very happy to stay here because we're quite hard pressed at the moment with the situation in Myanmar and with the numbers of people that we are overstretched. So very happy to be here and to contribute as I can to the work.
Would you tell us, Father Mark, about what some of that work is, where the Jesuit presence is particularly in Myanmar, what works and projects?
Well, as you probably know, and unfortunately, I suppose with Afghanistan and then with Ukraine, the disaster that is Myanmar at the moment has disappeared from the news. But Myanmar is a country of about 56 million people. The Catholic population would be 750,000, very small. But as often in Asia, with a presence far beyond the numbers, you could say. And the last year and a bit since a coup d'etat, the hopes of the young people of all of Myanmar have been dashed by a very savage, very brutal, very obscene attempt by the military to take power. So half the population, from the UN reports, are slipping now below the poverty line, and maybe 500,000 people newly displaced by the violence, something over 7,000 homes I just saw destroyed, over 1,700 people killed deliberately by the military trying to put down any opposition. So we're in a state of great chaos, you could say, as a country, because a lot of people, a lot of the civil servants have refused to go to work for this regime. So education, healthcare, social services, and the normal provision of electricity or water supply or postage or all of these things are diminished at the moment. So the country is just staggering along. And how are we working in that? I mean, this is all on top of the COVID pandemic, which has affected everybody around the world. So it affected us particularly because a lot of our work is in education and people couldn't come to school anymore. So like you, like us now, we switched to Zoom or to electronic ways of communicating, and we're able to keep our institutions running, various education institutions running online, even though this regime also restricted internet and has taken control of a lot of the electronic communications and made them more expensive. But this education has still continued, and that's our major work.
Mark, you mentioned that it's quite a young Jesuit region there, isn't it? Quite a few of your men are still in formation, which is great that you have a number of young men in formation, but it's a challenge that they're out of the country for a fair bit of the time.
Yes, we've got, we started in 1999, the novitiate opened. It's now an international novitiate. Novices come from Thailand and from Cambodia as well. This year we took in 5 and 4 took vows also. So it's building up quickly. There are already 11 priests, Myanmar priests, and 4 brothers. And then everybody else is a scholastic.
I think the first of the Myanmar-born Jesuits just took his final vows. Is that right? Was he the first?
Final vows. So Joseph Aikmong has just, he did his tertianship in Australia, and he's the first who is now fully incorporated into the society. So that's a big achievement. Also last year we became, it doesn't mean much, I suppose, to people, but we graduated from being a mission to being a region. So that means we have a juridical identity. We're a unit within the society, very much part of the international society. There are 7 of us here from abroad, 3 from India, 4 from Indonesia, and three from Indonesia and 3 from India, and myself.
Mark, this is just the latest part of a long time involvement with Asia in different roles, isn't it? I think you've been a major superior in different roles for about 20 years, part of that back in Australia, and then president of the conference.
Yes, I moved to Asia in the 80s. I spent most of the 80s based in Thailand, but developing the Jesuit Refugee Service throughout Asia Pacific. Father Arrupe actually asked me personally. We met in 1981. He was in the Philippines. We had a number of activities in the Philippines that year, July 81. And a couple of days after Ignatius Day, he personally came to see me. I was staying at a house a couple of 100 meters from where he was staying, and asked me to do this work. Then he went to Thailand and met the refugee workers there. Some had already begun, went back to Rome and had his cerebral stroke. So I never was able to really work with him. And his letter founding the Jesuit Refugee Service was 1.5 pages long. So my instructions, basically, for the next 20 years were in that 1.5 page letter. But then of course, I worked very closely with Father Kolfenbach in developing and expanding setting up the structures for the Jesuit Refugee Service worldwide.
I hope you got to fulfill all those instructions, Mark.
Well, they're very simple. Serve the refugees, accompany them, and defend their rights. So it's a very nice mission statement: to accompany, to be with, and to serve them as we can, and to defend them. So it's a work of charity and of justice. And the JRS has continued with that and is now with Ukraine, of course, deeply, deeply involved. But here they're working here in Myanmar as well. So that was my first time. You asked me about Asia Pacific. That was my first time in Asia Pacific to actually live in Asia Pacific. I'd spent many times visiting. And then when I came back to Australia, after finishing as provincial, Father Nicholas was the president of the conference. And of course, when he was elected general, needed to be replaced. I was finishing my term as provincial. They usually like to have a former provincial for that job. And there's usually not too many of us available and around. So I got the Guernsey. And I went to Manila in 2008 and stayed there till 2017. serving as the really support person, overseeing the international work and supporting the provincials in all the Asia Pacific countries.
Mark, that early work of Jesuit Refugee Service, as I understand it, was really a collaboration of Jesuits and lay people and other religious. Would you tell us something about the relationships that you developed and sustained you in that work, relationships with Jesuits, with lay people, with other religious, and how that helped that ministry give it its distinct identity?
The main relationships are with the refugees that would have sustained me. What's an extraordinary thing is, you think of the desperate situation of these refugees, but every time one visits them, they just lavish welcome and care on you. But it's true. We realized, as we realize everywhere now, that the Jesuits can't do it alone, that very early as we were developing Jesuit Refugee Service, it had to be a collaborative effort. The problem that the world faces now, the existential humanitarian crisis that we're in, is beyond anything we can do. So as young people are always telling us, this, everybody has to work together. So, and we brought in, at that time, invited people to come, not to help us, but to help the refugees. So according to their gifts. And so it was a question of collaborating with all sorts of people. But in the core group, especially, many sisters came, many lay people who share the Ignatian vision. And this has made the core of the refugee service, which has sustained us, one another, certainly sustained me, and really kept that spirit of Father Arrupe alive.
Mark, I imagine it was a very different Society of Jesus, I suppose, that you joined as a young man, having gone to a Jesuit school, and it's developed so much since then in different ways. What was it that attracted you to the Jesuits in the first place?
It's a bit surprising because I thought the Jesuits, many of the Jesuits I knew were a bit strange. They were lovely people, and there were some very good young scholastics and whatever. As a schoolboy, I didn't want to be a schoolmaster. I suppose that was the thing. It wasn't what attracted me. But in those days, that was the late 50s and early 60s, we had some enormous people of enormous stature, Pope John 23rd, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi. These were people who were alive to us and really stating things that appealed to, certainly appealed to me. Now, I knew the Jesuits from my parish and also from my school. I went to both St. Aloysius and St. Ignatius. So, we were familiar with them. We cooperated in the Indian mission, the Zaribagh mission, as schoolboys and as a family also. So all of those things attracted me. But my father also had a wonderful friend, a Hungarian priest, who used to often come around to our house. And that struck me that, the society is an international body. He was a Hungarian Jesuit who'd come out to serve the Hungarian migrants who'd come at that time. So that internationality of the society and the challenges of the world that we could see even at that time were also appealing to me. I had no idea going through my formation, even after my ordination, I still didn't know what I was being asked to do, but I was happy to be there. I'm sure the provincial didn't seem to know what to do with me either. it wasn't until Father Arrupe picked me up that really things took off.
So, Mark, given that experience that you've had, talking to young people today, particularly maybe young men who might be interested in joining the society, what advice do you give to them?
I'm not sure what I would say to them, but I'd certainly listen to them. I think it's great importance what people are saying to us today, what young people are saying to us today. They see the world and they look a little bit into their future. And I feel for them, because we are in a political, economic, humanitarian crisis in our world, for the environment and for the movement of people. The numbers of people displaced today are 10 times what we were dealing with. And we saw that as a crisis at that time, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. And so I would really listen to a young person and see how much they're able to work with others, and how much they're open to being mentored also. If there is an interest in the society, of course, I would want to walk with such a person.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, for giving us time and sharing your story with us today. It's great to speak to you across the miles, and thank you very much.
Thank you.